Welcome back to Ex Machina's Sega Special. In this part, we chart the high points of the hapless Dreamcast, look at the labour of love that became their most ambitious game, and glimpse into the future to see what's in store. First, it's time to pay our respects. While history may have cooled time on the dear old Dreamcast, here at Ex Machina we feel it's only fair that, like any obituary, we mention its finest achievements. Unfortunately, even with its launch titles, the Dreamcast didn't exactly set gamers on fire. Sonic, despite the revamp, simply wasn't the pull he'd once been. Whereas competent arcade conversions, Sega Rally 2, and the latest in the Virtua Fighter series, well, they didn't really turn those heads. And as it turned out, the Dreamcast's best fighting game would come not from Sega, but from their old arcade rivals, Namco. Soul Calibur was outstandingly attractive, a great little mover and much easier to get to grips with than Virtua Fighter. Surely this was what everyone wants. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to sell the console. Yes, it looked flash, but despite its virtues, it seemed that for the public at large, fighting games just didn't have the same appeal. Enter another Sega title, a driving number from their arcade activities. What, another driving game? Do me a favour. Well, actually they did, because Crazy Taxi was a big favour to anyone looking for a serious bit of fun. This concept sure wasn't about lap times. You've got to hand it to them. Who'd have thought clocking up cab fares could be this much fun? Raise hell amongst the traffic and clueless pedestrians as you tear through the streets of a city that could have come straight out of the movie Bullet. Well, Bullet crossed with Herbie Goes Bananas. And just to show they understood how to give console owners value for money, Sega threw in not only an additional city for extra mayhem, but a whole host of sub-games. If Crazy Taxi was a bright and breezy romp, fans of more somber forms of entertainment were soon to be just as happy. Resident Evil Code Veronica was an instant classic, and sales of Dreamcast shot up on the day of its release. A stunning intro sequence was followed by plenty of in-game action, meaty amounts of firepower, and more than its fair share of standoffs. Many people consider Veronica to be the best in the Resident Evil series, and sprawling over 2 enormous discs, it was certainly an epic. Next came another welcome arrival from Sega's arcade catalogue. Like Crazy Taxi before it, it benefited from running on arcade hardware that was technically akin to the Dreamcast, which meant that porting it over to their home machine was a right doddle. Bizarrely, Sega didn't bother tying the release of Virtua Tennis with the Wimbledon Championships. But at least Tim made it in there. I'm sure hordes of his female fans went over to Dreamcast just for him. Because this was what a sports game should be all about. Not official endorsement, not stats, or even a famous TV commentator. Just an accessible game, made by people who were aiming for flamboyant experience from the outset. And just to show this quality wasn't the preserve of the arcade divisions, following closely behind was a title produced specifically for the Dreamcast. And when people caught sight of it, well, most of us thought, lucky Dreamcast. The game that introduced us to the wondrous style of cell shading. While the PlayStation 2 was making its bold boasts of Toy Story standard graphics, the folks here were saying, who needs that old-fashioned look? This is where it's at. For those not into Jet Set Radio's anarchic action, there was something more refined on the way, and boy had it been a long time coming. Originally due for the machine's European release, the international racing epic proved to be an extraordinarily ambitious venture. The locations were as accurate as they'd been promised, but it had been a long slog making sure they were. The racing action proved just as solid as the scenery. It was the game the Dreamcast had badly needed after failing to produce a title to match Sony's Gran Turismo. Reason enough to get people buying Dreamcasts, but not unfortunately in time to win the war. 3 months later, Sega announced it was pulling out of the console market. The Dreamcast might have died, but before it did, Sega produced a game that'll be seen as a watershed for the company, a game into which they poured all the talent and cash at their disposal, Shenmue. Shenmue is quite simply an epic, offering unprecedented realism, emotion and adventure. It features hundreds of speaking characters and groundbreaking real-time environments. Set in Japan circa 1986, the game features around Ryo, who at the beginning of the game witnesses his father's death at the hand of a stranger. And yep, you've guessed it, Ryo wants revenge and ends up being caught in a quest for enlightenment. The game features a world large enough to engage gamers for hours, with thousands of rooms, a huge variety of real-life settings, and a massive cast of characters. Also in Shenmue, as in real life, weather and landscapes change according to the time of year, and time changes throughout the day, adding to the realism of the virtual world you've entered. And creating such a game caused more than a few difficulties, as you'd expect in a project lasting 5 years, and with an estimated price tag of $40 million. With painstaking attention to detail, the Japan-based 200-person development team helped create Yu Suzuki's vision. From the smallest detail to the largest building, nothing was left out. Imagine any major city without the sound of traffic or the hustle and bustle of a busy shopping district. It would just seem odd. And in a game this size, atmosphere is everything. Realistic sounds from car horns to general city noise has been recorded and implemented into the game. Add to this orchestral scores and thousands of lines of dialogue, and you've got a soundtrack as complicated as a Hollywood movie. In the early stages of development, the game's creators went beyond merely concept sketching. They made actual-size, chest-up clay models of the main characters to get a better idea of how these characters would look in real life. But then the characters needed movement. And let me tell you, with over 300 interactive characters within Shenmue, that's a lot of moving about. Most of these characters were created using the graphics tool Softimage, and then were digitally brought to life with the use of motion capture technology. The game features many motion capture moves, ranging from complex fighting scenes to simple activities such as walking and running. Most of Ryo's battle motion capture sequences were shot using professional Hakkyoken martial artist Tetsuya Hattori. Hours were spent recording his special fighting techniques and moves to give Ryo all the necessary skills that you'd expect in a modern video game martial arts action hero. And what's been touted as the most cinematic game ever created is set to receive a sequel. The action moves to Hong Kong and China, the plot thickens, and gamers will be able to relish what could be the Dreamcast's final gift to the world. As Sega discovered, the investment that went into Shenmue couldn't be recouped from Dreamcast owners alone, but with the company no longer tied to a single console, is Sega poised to rise like a phoenix from the flames? The return of the hell-raising Hedgehog is a clear sign that while Sega might have given up on the Dreamcast hardware, the software is another matter. Sonic Adventure 2 demonstrates the enduring appeal of a classic character and a talented design team's ability to deliver a refreshingly new take on the Spiky One's escapades. But it's not the only well-deserved sequel on the horizon. The New York setting of Crazy Taxi 2 giving the sequel a decidedly different flavour. There are multiple destination customers to spice things up, along with a gameplay innovation that lets your vehicle leap around like a kangaroo. The theory being, exaggerate the suspension, double the fun. Recent arcade titles will also be making the leap to the Dreamcast, ranging from crowd-pleasing action spectaculars to the more offbeat. Confidential Mission should keep action fans happy with its James Bond meets John Woo style of cinematic thrills. Or if your style of heroics is somewhat less violent, there's always brave firefighters. Aim a hose instead of a gun and save it in the excitement of saving babies from burning buildings, rather than the world. For those with more out-of-this-world tastes, Cosmic Smash should have a lot to offer. This bat-ball and neon curiosity is typical of the audacious gameplay found in the company's rich arcade catalogue. A catalogue now ready to be exploited on any of the next-generation consoles. How much will make it over to these consoles remains to be seen. We're already seeing a trickle on the PlayStation 2 that began with the original Crazy Taxi. More driving action will be following in the lumbering form of 18-wheeler, a Pan-American quest to outdo your fellow roadhogs, while the rest of the highway traffic literally trembles in fear. And for those who want rhythm action with a twist, Tetsuya Mizuguchi's Space Channel 5 is also set to spin within Sony's black box. With such a diversity of top-draw titles, the question now is, will Sega's newfound freedom spell trouble for the established publishers? Electronic Arts might be the world's biggest, but for how much longer? Aside from the possibility of Sega having a score to settle after they failed to support the Dreamcast, there's also the matter of both firms having competing sports ranges. Things could get very heated when it comes to winning the hearts and dollars of fans of the genre. Both of them tailor to the stable crowd pleasers like basketball, golf, and motor racing. But they do things very differently. Sega opting for fun and irreverence, while EA chase in-game statistics and the simulation feel. Predictably, perhaps, both are beginning to take a leaf out of the other's books. EA are wising up to the fun equals popularity concept, as witnessed in their fantasy boarding title SSX. And Sega have shown they understand the importance of getting leading personalities involved in the creation of their titles. The success of franchises like FIFA has often been down to marketing rather than any clear superiority in gameplay. So pay heed, Sega, it's worth talking to pop stars. The next generation consoleware is about to heat up, and like a supermodel that's split up with a long-term boyfriend, Sega finds itself with no shortage of suitors eager to form new alliances. Some might think that what with Sony having titles like this on the way, Sega would be surplus to requirements. Not a bit of it. Sony are well aware that failing to secure some of Sega's head-turners could play into the hands of their rival. And the PlayStation 2's biggest rival right now is hard to miss. Microsoft are lapping up Sega titles for the same reason as Sony. They can't afford to be without them. So far, the major promises to Mr. Gates has been a revision of Jet Set Radio and a re-emergence of Panzer Dragon, a series not seen since the days of the Saturn. The Xbox team know what a boost Sega games will give their machine, especially with the jury still out on whether Microsoft's in-house developers are up to scratch. And of course, there's still Sega's old-school rivals. Nintendo's Game Boy Advance will be getting Choo Choo Rocket in Sega's first significant move into handhelds since the failure of their own Game Gear in the early 90s. And as if that wasn't enough, Sega teams have expressed great interest in developing for Nintendo's GameCube. With titles in the works for every major console, it seems Sega is indeed reveling in its newfound freedom. And this can only be good for us players. Previously, Sega acted as an impetus to their hardware competitors to come up with better machines. This time round will be a motivation for anyone involved in making and publishing games to do a darn sight better. Let the world know it's pull your socks up.